All right, let's talk about something that trips up a lot of folks in the design and construction industry. Why does implementing building information modeling, BIM, always seem to cost way more than anyone expects? It turns out that software price tag is just the very beginning of the story.
So, let's get right to it. Why does BIM really cost so much? What's actually driving these huge numbers? It's a puzzle, for sure, and it goes so far beyond just buying a new program. We're going to break it all down.
Okay, so this is where almost everyone starts. They look at the price for a key tool like Autodesk Revit, and they see a number like $3,000 a year for a single user. And they think, okay, we can handle that. It seems pretty straightforward, right?
But that subscription fee, honestly, it's such a tiny piece of the puzzle, it's almost misleading. Thinking that's the main cost is probably the biggest and first mistake a company can make. The real costs? Well, they're all hiding under the surface.
So, let's dive in. To really get a handle on the true cost, we have to look below the waterline at all those massive, hidden expenses that make up the bulk of a real BIM implementation. This is where the budgets really start to break down. So we can really break these hidden costs down into 4 big buckets. First, you've got the people costs. Then, you have to overhaul your process. After that comes the surprisingly huge cost of managing your data. And finally, there's the handover of the project itself.
Let's kick things off with people. A 2022 study found that companies can see an initial cost bump of about 5%. And that's not from buying software. Nope. It's just from the productivity dip that happens when your team is learning a totally new way of working.
And this people cost is so much more than just paying for a training course. Think about it. It's all the paid hours when your team's output just slows to a crawl. It's the time your senior people have to spend mentoring and supervising. And maybe the biggest one, it's the cost of fixing all the mistakes that inevitably happen when people are still new to the tools. That is a massive, often totally unbudgeted expense.
And that brings us to the second major hidden cost, which this quote just nails perfectly. So many companies think they're just swapping out their old 2D drafting software for a shiny new 3D modeling tool. But that is a complete misunderstanding of what's actually happening.
See, you're not just changing a tool. You're fundamentally changing how your entire business operates. That means writing brand new company standards. It means redesigning your quality control process from the ground up. It means changing when and how projects get reviewed. And yeah, sometimes it even means restructuring entire teams to create new roles like BIM managers. This is deep operational change, and it takes a ton of time and resources.
Okay, next up is data. Once you start modeling in 3D, you run headfirst into this thing called data governance. All that means is creating a system of rules to make sure the information, the I in BIM, is actually available, usable, and trustworthy. For a lot of firms, this is a completely unexpected and frankly enormous challenge. I mean, what's the point of a gorgeous 3D model if the data inside it is a total mess, right? The real magic, the real value, comes from having consistent, reliable information that you can use for purchasing materials, for planning construction, and for operating the building for years to come. Getting that right? Well, that's the whole ballgame for the data and handover costs. Now, these aren't just abstract problems. They hit companies of different sizes in very different ways. What might be a huge roadblock for a small firm could just be a Tuesday for a large corporation, and the other way around too. Just look at this breakdown. For small firms, the biggest hurdle is just absorbing that initial financial hit. Their classic mistake? They buy the tool, but they don't invest in building the system around it. Medium-sized firms? They struggle to get everyone on the same page, and you end up with these internal silos where some teams are all in on BIM and others aren't. And the big guys? They can afford the software, no problem, but they often stumble trying to manage the sheer complexity and get consistent data governance across thousands of employees. It's a beast. So after hearing all that, all these crazy hidden costs and challenges, you're probably asking, why on earth would anyone do this? And what's the number one way this huge investment just completely goes down the drain? This slide lays out the choice perfectly. On one hand, you've got the payoff, and it's real. You spend more up front, but you save a ton later on through fewer mistakes, way better coordination, and a digital asset that has value for decades. But the pitfall is just as real. The most common failure by far is partial implementation. Buying the software but not actually changing the processes. That path just leads to frustration, people doing the same work twice, and a totally wasted investment. So, the most important thing to take away from all this is that we have to completely reframe the conversation. If your company is only talking about which software to buy, you are already heading for trouble.
This quote says it all, doesn't it? The cost is so high because what you're really paying for is to fundamentally change how your business operates. The software? That's just the price of admission to a much, much bigger show.
And that really leaves us with the one final question, the one every single leader should be asking themselves. Are you just buying a tool to check a box on a proposal? Or are you truly investing in building a new future for how you work? The answer to that? Well, that changes everything.